What's up, everyone? Welcome. Hope you're all doing well tonight. So, if you didn't see in the chat, I wrote just a second ago that Nate texted me a few minutes prior and let me know that he was going to be about 10 minutes late to this session today. So, that's totally fine. We can chat. I can answer your questions. I wanted to make a few kind of quick announcements, anyways. I know a few people weren't able to come to the live that we did on Tuesday night. So hopefully you can get any questions that you have answered on this one. I'm actually not in my nice sort of home office live studio thing. I was switching out some camera arms and I needed to buy another piece. So now none of the stuff I had fit. So I had to come over here to my co-working space today. But I'm excited that you all are here. Um, I expect there be not as many people here tonight. We didn't really promote this one quite as much. It was more of just like a, hey, by the way, we're going to be doing this extra live session. So it should be a smaller group. So if you got questions, you should be able to get every single question that you have answered. If you don't know me, which you likely do since you're probably on our email list, I think that's the only place we advertise this. But I'm David, founder of Drill Launch Academy. It's nice to see you all here. There's nobody else in the chat tonight. It's just gonna be me and normally I have Audrey in the chat or someone else from our team to kind of answer questions as we go. But I figured since Nate was gonna be doing most of the talking, I can kind of man the chat. So I'll be here checking in. Do I still look frozen to everyone? Chad says I'm frozen. Hopefully you guys can see me. Boop, boop, boop. Let's see here. Yeah, Brandon said he missed the other night. No worries. We're good. Matthew, this is going to be recorded, so you can go back and watch this anytime on our YouTube channel. And I'm curious, Matt, are you the same Matt who I was talking to on LinkedIn a couple days ago from Ohio? Or are there two Matt Ernsts that following us? I'm good. Okay, cool. Fine here. Sweet. All right, now frozen. Chad, maybe try to refresh. All right, well, before Nate gets here, I've already burned 2 minutes of our 10 here. If you are not aware, we launched our advanced drone mapping and modeling program Tuesday night. I sent an email about it last night and then one this afternoon. Nate Howard is an instructor in that course. I was going to tell you real quick where to go if you want to find out more about it. I'm not going to be promoting it a lot or anything this evening, but I will pull it up briefly right here. So if you go to, it doesn't show the URL on the screen. But if you just go to Drone Launch Academy, you can see right here. I think you can see my mouse. Drone Launch Academy courses. It should be, hold on. I might need to refresh. I changed this menu bar. All right. Individuals, courses, advanced drone mapping and modeling. You can either pick this first one, which is the full program. These are the individual courses that are currently inside of the program. So if you click on any one of those, it'll take you to, I know it's probably laggy since I'm live streaming, Geodesy for drone surveying. So you can see all of the first course, see what it's about. There's like a 4 to 6 minute promo video for each course to kind of gives you an idea of what's inside. Here are the 4 courses that are currently inside the program. The 5th course is on its way, should be here in May. But you can read all about it, watch a video about who Dave Doyle is, each instructor. We have course outlines in here for you to take a look through, see what you're going to learn. If you're not familiar with what Geodesy is, this kind of gives you some info here, what's included in the course. We're giving away free lessons from the course. If I click here, hopefully this takes me to the actual lesson. Yeah. So you get a free lesson you can take and learn about datums right here. You can see sort of everything that's inside of the course. So we have that for each of the 4 courses. And it's so that if you go up here and you actually click on this next one, it'll take you to the next course and you can check that out and see what's there. This one is GNSS positioning and survey control. Again, a little 5-minute video. You can kind of take a look about Chris Breedlove, who he is, what you're going to learn. I think I gave a freebie in this one too, right? Let's see. Yeah, free lesson here. So if you click this lesson, I think this one's GCPs. Yeah, so we talk about GCPs there. So feel free to go dive into that, check it out. This if you're not familiar with the 4 courses, I can show you real quick. They are GNSS positioning and survey control, advanced mapping for construction engineering. This is what Nate teaches. So he's the instructor for this one. So you'll see he's down there. See if I got his photo in here. Hold on. You can see this is Nate, who will be popping on here briefly. Okay. But Nate's been in surveying and construction for 25 years. He's a survey manager for one of the regions at Kiewit. Kiewit is, I think, the 2nd or 3rd largest construction and engineering firm in the United States. And he manages Texas, Oklahoma, Indiana, like all the central of the United States. That's why he missed the last webinar, actually, was that he had a issue in Indiana with one of their projects. I guess all of their equipment, I think it was the machine, he can talk about it, but I think it was the machine control GPS stuff was not working correctly or something. So literally the same day he had to go book a flight and fly to Indiana. I was like, hey man, I'm really sorry. I'm not gonna be able to make it. He thought he could fly up there early and still do it that night, but then the flight got delayed and it didn't work out. So he offered very kindly to do this second session with us. So, which I think works out best because then gives him more time to kind of answer and do all that stuff. Yeah, so that's this one, and then there's one more through Patel here, advanced mapping for land survey. So you can dive into each one of these if you want and explore more of what they are. There's free lessons for each one if you want to see what's inside. And then if you want to go to the full program, you just click any of these full program buttons, and here it is. And pricing wise, this is the pricing until Monday. It's the most expensive thing we've ever sold. So understand it's not for everybody. This is really just for people who are wanting to take mapping pretty seriously. So it's the first 4 courses that are included. These are going to be the normal prices, kind of like our B2B prices that we're going to be rolling out with to larger companies. You can get the first 4 courses right now for $11.96. You can also purchase each of them individually. So like if you went back to those pages, it's the same code, ADMM launch. If you type that promo code into any of these courses individually, it will give you these launch prices here. But you save an extra $300 if you get the full bundle. So it's almost like getting the GNSS positioning course for free if you buy the full bundle. Anyways, and then you can try it for 30 days if you want. And if it's not what you want, then you get your money back. I think I put a little caveat in here, unless you actually go through and you get the certification, because you have to pay for those. And if you go through the whole thing and get the certification, that's not exactly like testing it out, you know what I'm saying? So, all right, so that's that. Well, I wanted to give someone a shout out too. Charles Schiller. This guy already went through the first course, Geodesy, and passed the exam. This guy, I think he signed up on the first day we opened it and just really went at it and got to town. And so he's got his own certification here. He posted on LinkedIn, seen his credentials on LinkedIn. So I shouted him out on LinkedIn and reposted it. But congrats, Charles, getting it done. So very nice work. All right. Sorry, I was not paying attention to the chat. I'm coming back here. All right. Let me look at some questions here. Let's see. Benjamin's got one. I believe VFD volunteer program. I have approval from a new solar farm in our jurisdiction. I have a Mini 4 Pro, just bought an Air 3. Do you foresee any issues trying to map with the equipment I have? Well, Benjamin, you're in luck, I think, because DroneLink just announced, I think it was literally yesterday. So the Air 3 you won't be able to map with. They don't have the SDK released for that. But DroneLink, I believe, just came out with support for the Mini 4 Pro. Yes, I'm going to share my screen with you here. This is pretty big news. This is great for people who have the Mini 4 Pro. You see this? So if you go to dronelink.com, you can click supported drones, and they'll show all the ones that work. Right here, Mini 4 Pro. I don't know what they're, it just gives you extra information there. Can you guys see my screen? Hopefully you can. Yeah. It's Mini 4 Pro. They also do the Mini 3 and the Mini 3 Pro. Mini 3 is like the most inexpensive way to get started with drone mapping at this moment. So cool. So yeah, you'd be good with that. I mean, you're not gonna be able to do like big commercial jobs, but like you can functionally create a map. I believe I'd have to look at the sensor on the Mini 4 Pro. I haven't actually checked it out that much for mapping purposes because they literally just added it to their supported drones within the last, I think, 2 days. So, what was the first marketing move that actually brought you a paying drone client? And if you had to start over today, would you do it the same way? So I have personally gotten a few paying drone clients over the years through relationships and inbound. Now I know how a ton of other people have done it too. It's probably more helpful for me to share the way they've done it because other people have done much more high volume. My time these days is spent mostly running Drone Launch Academy, linking up with people like Nate and others who are experts in their thing and bringing them on to our platform to help teach. So in our Drone to 1K podcast. We interview all these different drone entrepreneurs. We also have a Drone to 1K course where other people have taught this stuff. What we did recently, actually, was we did cold email outreach in our Drone to 1K course. We added some modules on that, and that actually works quite well. Now, you're not just spamming people, but you're finding contacts for people that are in your target area that you are trying to. So real estate agents or, survey firms, construction managers, whomever it is that you're targeting. You can find these people's information online, industry lists, or you go to LinkedIn or whatever. If you work, you can find out how to contact them in some way. And then there's sort of a format we put together of how to like reach out to them. You're not going to write this really long thing. It's really short. Try to, go in with like a low barrier ask just to introduce yourself. So usually that gets hit rates of like, let's say, or reply rates of somewhere around 5 to 10%. If you're doing it in like a more mass volume, you'll have lower rates because you can't like personalize it as much. But we did it live with some students, and the ones we were doing it live with that were actually testing it out, they went and sent it out to a few dozen people, and our rates were around, I think, 10 to 15%. So if they went out and emailed 100 people, they were getting 15 people to reply to them and actually got in a conversation. And that will lead to sort of like demo jobs, and then you can move from demo jobs into actually like paid engagements. So that's probably how I would do it. It's probably the most direct. You usually need some type of confidence builder for them. So either some example work that you haven't before or something to build your credibility. I know a lot of people starting off like, well, I don't have anything to show, but you can always go out and try to do something. If you're making a map, go map a vacant piece of property and, put together an ortho on it and, see what that looks like. So that's what I would do. I'd probably start with that, and maybe just calling people up in your community, introducing yourself. Hey, I'm David. Here's what I do. Just wanted to introduce myself. No, no pressure to do anything. Just wanted to start building some relationships with folks in the industry. That actually usually goes further than you think. And then be patient, because I know sometimes I've heard stories. People, they call someone up, they make a relationship, they say great, and then nothing happens. And a year later, they're like, oh, this one guy called me. Let me get his contact info. Always follow up with an email too if you do call them. And then they'll follow. And I heard about a guy who got a $20,000 job that way because he just had called someone a year earlier, had followed up with them, and then suddenly they had a need and they contacted them. So cool. All right. Huge. I think you're talking about Kiewit. Been a carpenter for 20 years. Okay, cool. What is this? Do you think I have a chance asking them for help with your course and opportunity with them? Are you talking about Kiewit, Constantino? Let's see. Oh yeah, that's the easiest thing you can do if you're looking for business, is just set up Google My Business, or it's like business.google.com. Just make sure you have a profile there. Put your information on there. Throw a few photos up. Get some reviews, even if it's like people that you've done little volunteer free jobs for. If you get reviews, I've heard a lot of people just getting jobs from that. So, what's better, the Mini 3 Pro or the Mini 4 Pro? That's a good question. Honestly, since I leave most of the cinematography stuff up to Alex Harris, I have not really done an in-depth review of those. But now that they're both options for kind of starter mapping, I will probably look at them a little bit more. I would imagine for mapping, they're pretty comparable. I don't think the sensors are super different, because that's what you're looking at on mapping is what is the size of the sensor, and how many megapixels, and other things like focal length and all that determines your ground sampling distance. But I imagine they're pretty comparable. I think probably there were other features that differentiate the Mini 4 Pro from the Mini 3 Pro that were probably more on like the user interface or like the cinematography side of things. Is Mavic 2 Pro good for commercial grade deliverables? Yeah, it's got a 20 megapixel sensor. I would say it's probably comparable to like an Air 2S type of thing. So it doesn't have RTK or anything like that. But again, I don't know if you were on the call 2 nights ago, but if you have survey control or somebody who has went out and collected survey control points, and they're providing that data to you, and you actually have ground control points in your map, you can get pretty good absolute accuracy still, even with something like a Mavic 2 Pro. It's not going to be as sexy as all these people who've got all these RTK drones and these M350s, $20,000 drones, or their $5,000 M3Es, all that. But you'd be surprised how accurate you can get it if you have good ground control points. That makes, and in all the testing we've done, that's made the largest difference from being way off accuracy wise. I'm talking like, I think I said in one of the other videos, my Air 2S with no ground control was over 200 feet off vertically. Like it said the ground was here, but it was actually like 200 feet off somewhere else. 3 feet off horizontally in one direction, and I think a foot off horizontally in the other direction. So that's like pretty far off from the real world coordinates. But then when we locked in ground control, it brought it back into like within a close tolerance. We did the same thing with a, what was it with, I think the Wingtra drone. We processed it without any ground control. And it was, so no GPS corrections, no ground control, nothing, just raw data. And then we did it with just the ground control points, no like RTK, PPK corrections. And then we did it with the full shebang. And the ground control, putting in the GCPs and ground control points made the biggest difference. All right, Nate just texted me and said he's logging in, so he should be here in just a second. I will leave this as a project for, or as a question for Nate, because he's worked on the big ones. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling down and you guys are asking questions here. In 2 minutes, about a surveying company hiring me and helping me with the course on sale. I guess what's your question, Constantino, that you are curious about? Ooh, M30T. That's if you're gonna a T, that's for thermal typically. That's probably not what you want to use for. I mean, you can do photogrammetry for thermal stuff. My friend Jeff Carrillo does it. I'm not as much into that. If you're doing like commercial roof inspections to see water intrusion, that's the primary purpose of that, or what he uses it for primarily. If you're mapping something. But you're paying for a lot of stuff that you're not using. I think the M30T, I can't remember how expensive it is, but it's not cheap. If you're looking for mapping, there are cheaper options. Like I think you can get a Mavic 3 Enterprise now for like $4,000. I want to say somewhere in there. And that'll be way cheaper. What about the Avata 2? I mean, Avata 2 is great if you like making videos and having fun. Not a whole lot going on with Avata 2 as it comes to mapping, but on construction sites, I could see them using it for marketing purposes. I mean, Nate even talked about how they like to do some marketing update videos of their construction sites, just for people that are not nearby. You know, they have hundreds of active sites, probably thousands, hundreds that they use drones on actively, all over the country. And so they have to kind of keep their leadership up to date on where things are. So, yeah, you could use it for that. What key deliverables do I need to provide beyond an ortho? Nate has just logged on. I'll let him chime into these. Nate, you ready for me to bring you up? All right, here we go. Hold on. Welcome to the stage, everyone. Nate Howard.
Sorry about that, guys. It's been a little bit of a week.
Yeah, sounds like it. I told them that you had to bail on the webinar because what happened with the equipment in Indiana? I forget what was the deal.
So it's kind of interesting. So they have a bunch of equipment down there, and they actually didn't have a surveyor on site. So this kind of ties into part of the course that you're doing too for this advanced mapping is like understanding coordinate systems, local calibrations, because they knew just enough to be dangerous, and like moved the GPS base, calibrated some stuff. They're using machine control, and it was like, hey, these things are like showing that they're 110 foot off in the world, and then they're floating in the sky when you look on the display on the machines. And it was just something that felt way more comfortable going out there in person versus like trying to talk over the phone. There's a couple of things, you know what I mean? Because like there's some things where it's like, depending on the skill level or the competency on job site, and it's nothing against the team. It's ignorance versus yeah. So it's like, okay, they don't know. So went out there, helped them out, and then it was just it was just a comedy of errors, and I was just like, what?
Yeah, you sent me some pretty entertaining trip commentary there.
Yeah. Well, my wife was like, every time you do something, there's just like a ridiculous situation that happens with your travel. Start writing that down. So I'm waiting on the plane this morning when they when we had all sorts of flight issues. I started typing that up on my phone.
It was great. Nate had some Taco Bell drama while he was out there, and flights getting delayed all the time. So, anyways, well, I'm glad you're here.
Thanks.
All right, the folks are clamoring with questions here. So, Nate, for those who don't know, you just wanted to do a quick 30-second intro about
Yep.
yourself.
Yeah. So Nate Howard, I've been doing surveying for probably 20 to I think it's right at 24 years now. So started with land surveying. We did construction, a bunch of different stuff like that. Ended up going to Kiewit about 6, 7 years of my career. Started getting into CAD, and then eventually became a survey manager. Started getting into drones on a project probably about 6, 7 years ago, and then just I love technology. Big proponent of pushing technology and growing, but thinking like making sure that everybody understands like the fundamentals behind it. Because I think a lot of times what I see from like with this Indiana situation and other things I see is typically it's user error or lack of knowledge on the fundamental side that causes some issues because technology, drones, all that kind of stuff, they're going to do exactly what we program them to do and tell them to do. So making sure that we have that understanding, that's kind of, I'm very passionate about that.
Cool. So I'm taking the jacket off.
You gonna make it?
Yeah. No. Well, I'm in this little room here at my co-working space, and it's not a whole lot of airflow going on here. Cool. Well, I was telling everybody on the call the other night just the growth in drones, drone use at Kiewit, and how you guys. I think when we looked at the numbers, it was somewhere around 3 to 4x in the last 2 years, and how many job sites you all are using drones on. So, might be helpful to start. You just want to walk us through a typical what's a typical job? I mean, I know you probably do like a ton of different jobs, but like for Kiewit, what's sort of like a bread and butter type of job, and then how might you deploy drones and the related deliverables on a job site like that?
We'll stick with like it's weird because they're technically all job sites, but we'll call it just a site project. So like a plant type project, kind of like think of it like a parking lot or something, a power plant, small power plant, solar farm, something like that. Versus
Okay, sure.
there's a massive amount of complexity that goes into highway work and trying to use drones on that because of over people, that kind of stuff. So if you think about just call it a 200-acre plant site or a project like that, where all the work's contained in there. Um, so typically what we do is start with a surveyor, third-party surveyor, get out there, a licensed surveyor to verify the control. There's massive risk in like control and calibration, as
You've seen, yeah.
as I was overexposed to yesterday, and just trying to, it's one of those things that trying to back in and fix something, it's just a mess. So it's super important to have somebody that really understands that to get that set up right. And then from the drone standpoint, you can use a lot of that information and get that going from there. Use that control that those surveyors have set up and that kind of thing. So typically we go out there on these sites. We would then start doing some, call it the pre-planning, right? I like to do usually my first flight plan, whether it's on Google Earth or going through drone deploy or propeller or even on the ground control station itself. I like to go much larger than the job site for our first flight because it's easier to go big and then shrink it down after that versus.
I was going to try to. Oh, sorry. What were you going to say? You mentioned your Google Earth. I was going to try to pull up that one lesson where you're actually doing this all in Google Earth, showing them what it looks like.
Yeah, because that's really the big thing for me too, is like finding out before I even go to the site is how many batteries is this going to take? How long is this flight going to take? And again, like there's kind of an art when you're doing pre-planning missions like this, because it's all weather dependent, that kind of thing. So it's like you're going to get all these different programs are going to tell you, even Wingtra Hub, all that is like, oh, this is only going to take you 45 minutes. And then you go out there and it's windy and it's like an hour and a half to 2 hours. And you're going, what was going on here?
You're like, what?
Yeah. So,
Yes, here's like a little sample of, what you've shown in the course as far as like, this is Google Earth. You are plotting out where you're going to put all your ground control points. You've got this is your flight area that you kind of defined, right?
yeah. So for this one too, it's kind of a little skewed. We put a massive flight plan together. Well, not massive. I think all in this was like 50 or 60 acres. But our ground control was really contained in that northwest corner, which was really the only active part of the job site. So there's a little bit of that too. Is like me, when I look at this stuff, and something to keep in mind for these construction sites is I like to get a little bigger so you can see access roads and that kind of stuff. Because typically, once we get aerials, we share them with subcontractors. We use them for planning. So going a little bit outside the active work area is super beneficial.
Yeah, and like we can show here. I think if I'm not going to play the video, but like you mentioned, so here like your ground control, right? It's up in that kind of northwest corner, because that's the part that you actually need to be accurate, because that's where the engineering plans were for, and the rest is more for just kind of like documentation, right? Of having.
Yep. Yeah.
And then this, I believe you were looking at towers, like cell phone towers, make sure that the Wingtra wasn't going to fly into anything. And there actually was one over here on the right, northeast side.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is stuff about towers. And then I think we were looking at power lines too, because that is a consideration for the Wingtra when it's doing its sort of transition up to altitude.
Yeah.
So that's your Google Earth stuff. So as far as deliverables goes, like you're going out there, you're flying it, you'll process it. I know you guys use propeller for most of your stuff, and everything's going to give you, whether you're using propeller, drone deploy, Pix4D, whatever, you're going to get some type of base. They all output similar things, right? Like an ortho or a geotiff, point cloud. I guess if you wanted like the mesh, 3D mesh. I don't know, you guys ever use the 3D mesh when you're looking at stuff?
Sometimes. So some of our programs and everything on the CAD side and that type of deal, they do want to see the meshes, but for the most part, we stick to, even with I say point cloud. Some people have a little bit of heartburn calling the data you get from photogrammetry a point cloud, because typically in the industry you say point cloud,
LiDAR.
It should be LiDAR, right?
Yeah.
So there's a photogrammetry, you still get a point cloud, but it's not as accurate, or depending on how you set it up, there's big differences between the LiDAR point cloud and a photogrammetry point cloud. But you're essentially still getting X, Y, and Z values on every point in that point cloud.
It's just how those points are getting there. One's with a laser, millions of lasers, and the other one is with photos that are being kind of tied together. I'm going to answer. I see a good question here. So let's answer this. So what are some typical things that all of these people, I know a ton of people have access to these job, what do you want to call them? Like the project files, right? So we've talked about this in the past. You've mentioned there's just people who want to check in and see how the job site is progressing, right? Like maybe like some management level. I don't know. Did they look at it? Like, give us all the things you can think of as to what is this data being used for?
We call those actually. They don't see the folders that I make to dump them in for their access levels, but those are in our looky-loos folder. The people that stop by and look at a picture and see what's going on the job site. Yeah, it's like, so you got that, and really, if you start from the top down, like your big decision makers, your high ups, they want to see what's going on. They want to see progress. They don't care about elevations. They don't care about any of that kind of stuff. They go, hey, I want to see the picture from last week and the picture from this week. Um, so we set that up at that level, and then going deeper when you get onto the project level, down to your, we call them discipline managers, right? So the guys that are over the grading department, the civil department, the drainage department, the electrical department, each one of these different groups, now they start wanting to look at, hey, I need, for different reasons, elevations on dirt, elevations on the road, cross sections, all sorts of, they start looking at, hey, I want to see the actual photogrammetry data and the actual 3D data versus the picture. Want to be able to rotate, check things. A lot of guys use that for planning. Some of our maintenance groups have started using this too. We do a lot of internal trucking, moving around cranes, that kind of thing. There's very specific requirements for cranes have to be set up on pads that can't exceed like a 1% cross slope. So they got to be fairly flat. So for that, and offloading trucks, if you're on these highway projects, they're coming off a highway into what looks like could be a fairly stable area, but depending on the slope of the road and the grade change, a lot of these truck drivers don't know until they do it, or until they drive off the road and they're like, oh crap.
Are they worried about the truck rolling?
Yeah, so like we've had instances, and you can see this on a lot of job sites too. This is not a Kiewit problem. This is not a common deal that we do.
Speaking in generalities.
Generality. Rollovers are pretty common.
Really?
There's actually, yeah. So like if you look at our dump trucks, so like it's usually third party outside trucking that this happens to. Most of our internal guys, we don't have these issues, but like if you've got your bed tipped up, and you're still trying to drive and the slope changes or something happens, that can roll over. We've had that happen with dozers, seen it with excavators, that kind of thing. And then if you've got, you're hauling a massive piece of equipment on an 18-wheeler and it's sitting sideways and you're trying to unload it, right? So a lot of this helps just for pre-planning and that kind of thing. So it's like some of these things like we look at and start, I encourage people to like, hey, really use your imagination. It's like, because originally it started for us as, hey, we're just gonna, girder trucks are a big deal too. That's right, Brandon. But like, if you're not sure, if you think something bad might happen, and that this data may be useful or could prevent something, probably could. And that's like, I think that's the biggest thing. It's like there's so much information here that you can use to prevent and like predict and plan.
Well, I think it's just helpful too. I mean, it sounds like we have some folks in the chat who are pretty familiar with construction and what's on these sites and the things that you encounter. But there's a lot of people who, if they're not exposed to that construction world on a day-to-day basis, it's like you don't even know what things are useful and what, like all the stuff you talked about, like it would probably never cross most people's minds to suggest that as, hey, this can help with, one of those things. So basically tons and tons of stuff with slopes and how quickly elevation changes in terms of safety. Not to mention, I know in the course, one of the examples we used and looked at was just more like drainage and runoff and looking at water flow and things like that. And I know you had told me this wasn't necessarily a drone problem, but just the importance of having your heights dialed in. This sounds like, I remember, maybe I'm making this story up. It was like there was a miscommunication with somebody on some project at some point, and like the elevation was off by like 4 inches, and then the like where the water was supposed to drain off the road came down like 4 inches below that or something like that. So they had to build it up or rework it or something.
Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff that happens like that. With a lot of people don't understand like the data and the power of this data. You have typical jobs too that, even on a widening project on a highway. So a widening project, essentially they bring in asphalt and they just put either asphalt or something else over the existing roadway. They do a little bit of grading work and then they extend the roadway out. So we've had things like that where it's like typically you don't need survey, you don't really need a design, because we call them, on these overlay projects, hey, we're just going to put 3 or 4 inches on top of
Right.
what's already there.
Wherever's already there. Yeah.
So having something like a drone come through first, you get that 3D map, and you're going to go, hey, if we add 4 inches here, that's going to cause an issue over here to the side, because now we're either lower or higher, and that changes the water flow, right? So stuff like that. I think because with any type of construction, as soon as you do anything out there, you change the natural flow of the water, right?
Yeah.
So, and depending on the type of work, the contract may not require you to actually look at that, but you're still held liable if you screw it up and you flood the road.
Yeah. All right, let's get a couple questions here. Someone had a good one. MM. As someone new to drones and interested in surveying, I'm curious, what's the one thing you wish more pilots understood before stepping onto a job site with surveyors or engineers?
Sorry. Honestly, though, sorry, we've been dealing with this a lot, talking with a bunch of groups internally. It's like, so with surveyors, like,
yeah, what's the internal joke here? With
I laugh because like surveyors and engineers are two, like, the personalities of surveyors and engineers super interesting. Like I love psychology and studying humans and just like people watching. Surveyors, most of them, I would say about 80-90% of them are never wrong. so be careful how you discuss things with the surveyor, because if you go, hey, I think there's a problem, they're going to go, what do you know? You're just a drone guy. Like, I'm a surveyor. I know what's going on. So I think like approaching these situations with surveyors and engineers who may not fully understand the tools, the drones, and the things that it's doing, like a big deal is ask questions, get information from these guys. Because the other thing is there's a lot of, I don't know if it's purposeful, but like withholding of knowledge and protecting like control and that kind of thing. So that's
what about like maybe another way to phrase it, or to take another angle, might be what are some of the biggest knowledge weaknesses you see in maybe drone pilots when they go to do this type of work?
I think probably the biggest thing I've seen is the understanding of ground control and tying into a project, right?
Like from a coordinate system and target standpoint.
Well, and there's so we use propeller very heavily inside Kiewit. Propeller kind of, they're a very simple system. They have these arrow points, which is essentially like a little foam target ground control point. You turn it on and it starts collecting GPS data. Something that I've seen with some inexperienced pilots is they don't understand that, like, if you're using a RTK or some sort of PVK solution that's not like where you have to set something up on the project, it has to be on the entire time the drone's in the air. So like we've seen it where like a guy will pick up the base and move it while the drone's flying. So essentially that stops all your corrections and there's nothing they compare the data to, right?
Yeah.
It's just some of that stuff is like, be very familiar with the surveying / drone workflow to get this data correct. Because that's and I love technology, again, huge proponent of it, but you got to be very careful because most of these vendors are going to sell it based on how simple it is to use, and you don't have to have any of this background knowledge. You just go turn it on and magic happens. And that's super, super dangerous because it's not it's not that simple. I think I can't remember if I shared this with you, David, or not when we were met up last time, but we had a job site, this large solar job site, and they were concerned that the LiDAR was messed up versus the photogrammetry they were doing. And when I looked at it, they had one ground control point in the middle of the project, and it was like 1,600 acres. So what that does is that tilts the whole project because it's only really got one reference point to tie down. So the issue wasn't the LiDAR, it was the workflow and the process and the photogrammetry side. Once we fixed that, did some coaching and training on that, got them to understand like how to tie everything down. Everything matched perfectly, tied
It,
together.
it was really more where you're placing your ground control, right? And
Yep.
making sure that it's put in the right places, and that when you have collected those, coordinate point data, put it in, it worked fine.
Right. And I think understanding your coverage area too. So, if you're looking at a 50-acre job site, you may not have to put 30 ground control points out. If
Right.
you're looking at a 1,600-acre site, you're going to probably put 30 or 50.
Mm.
So I think
I said, I
that's
grunted a little bit because one of my buddies who does work for surveyors, or Root, he teaches the land survey course. So he just got a big project, like 1,000 plot development, and there was another one that was pretty large. I can't remember. I think it was like 1,000 acres.
Hmm.
Um, and Wingtra, they're coming down in a few weeks. I think I told you that. Because we're going to test some stuff out for them. So we were going to try it out on that. And I was just thinking, I think doing all the ground control work is going to take twice or 4 times as long as, actually collecting the data. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we got a couple more questions here. That was a good one.
I would. So Steve just made a comment too. Managing your errors and know your tolerances. That's important too. It's like know the tolerances of the drone that you're using, what it can actually provide versus like what your client and what the project needs, right? Because like GPS, poor ground control, right? If you don't tie it into the local network, you're talking about plus or minus 1/10 of a foot, which is like 1.25 inches, right? So you provide that data over based off of the best that your drone could do, the best that your ground control is, and give it to a project. And the other thing is on the project side, your surveyors and engineers may think that you're within absolute accuracy. So they're going to think, hey, this is a quarter inch. I can use this for creating slopes and cross slopes and doing designs on. Because we've seen that too, is our engineers, our design engineers take some data, whether it's LiDAR, photogrammetry, or some surface, and they start designing off of it, but a surveyor hasn't went out and done some hard checks in the world to make sure that there's no difference in elevation at our tie-ins and these critical areas. We've had that happen across my entire career. Hewitt, I worked for a company called AUI, and when I first started land surveying too, that was one of the biggest issues we see is somebody just takes some data, starts designing $1 billion project off of it, and never actually validates that the data they got ties in the real world. And that's more of a field survey taking, hey, I think there was a question in here too about how do you verify your own data if they need it to be 100% Magni. So like
I missed it. Hold on. Oh, here we go. I'll throw that up there.
Yep. So I think like looking at that, there's a little bit of, and this is kind of the weird thing in the world too, in our world, is it doesn't matter how well you verify your data. Best practice is I'm always still it's the whole trust but verify, right? You're going to hand me a design surface. You're going to hand me a point cloud, whatever it is, and I'm still going to go out there and do some ground truthing with a surveyor and go, hey, verify before we use this data that it checks in and it's good. Because there's always going to be error between no two surveyors are ever going to agree, right? Especially talking with GPS. GPS is fantastic, but at the same time, you're going to see small deviations, right? There's like a Trimble TopCon, like a MLID, all these different GPS systems, and each one of them has its own little inaccuracies in it. You can set up all of those systems next to each other, all of them in the same coordinate system, go shoot the exact same point, and you're going to get deviations all over the place. So part of that is your on-site surveyors and those kind of things are going to take your data, truth it, and go, hey, we see a consistent inaccuracy of this much, and then we do an adjustment, right? And then we'll take that data. So you may be 100% validated relative to yourself, but like we've got to essentially localize that or calibrate it is a word we throw around a lot. You do a site calibration to kind of tie in your control and make it fit the world you're in.
One thing that is common that they use to validate how accurate something might be is check shots, if you're not familiar with that. So basically, you have your ground control points that the drone will capture, and you know for certain, or at least you've gotten to some accuracy level, depending on what receiver and methods you are using, of
Yep.
the coordinates and heights of these ground control points. And so your photogrammetry software is going to go, okay, cool. David's told me that this point is this coordinate, this one's this, and it will adjust your map to fit all those points the best it can to get it as close as it can get. And then you're going to go out with somebody's going to go out with a GNSS receiver and shoot a bunch
Yep.
more points. Sometimes if it's a physical thing you can see from the sky, they can use that as to check the horizontal accuracy. And otherwise, they'll just use it to check vertical accuracy.
Yeah.
Use as check shots. When it comes in sort of the quality report, it'll say, hey, your drone map told me that the elevation of this exact coordinate was, 250 feet, whatever, in whatever height you're looking at. But your check shot said it was 255 feet. So this is 5 feet off. But you have a bunch of those, and it can sort of give you your average error across the project. And that is what can give you either feel good or feel bad about how dialed in your accuracy is. So I would imagine, they're going out there and taking check shots. Nate, I was going to ask one thing I had heard someone bring up, and I thought was a pretty good point or I know you and I talked about it too, is, drones are never going to be like millimeter accuracy. It's just like not that technology. It's
Yep.
just not there. Like you're using photographs to reconstruct the Earth. So usually the best you ever get is like a centimeter or two.
Yeah.
And that is probably kind of like, maybe it's questionable if people advertise that. But if there's some instances where, you're building a bridge and you need it to exactly line up, or drainage or whatever, you need millimeter accuracy where surveyors are still going to use handheld or ground tools leveling.
Yep.
So in light of that, someone mentioned like, hey, if you're just doing drone work and you're like taking some GCPs, let's say you have an MLID, like GNSS receiver, that might be accurate according to them within like 2 centimeters. Like, is there a big benefit over using a $30,000 Trimble receiver that may have, accuracy within a few millimeters versus an MLID that's going to have 2 centimeters? If your drone data, you can only click on a pixel that's a centimeter wide, anyways.
I
I could definitely understand how it would be
so
useful for the other things that they're doing on the job site, that aren't even related to drones, where they
yeah.
need that control regardless.
Well, I would say like so if you're upfront with your clients and you explain like, hey, this is relative accuracy at this, right? Based off this SIMLID receiver, based off this drone, my total relative absolute accuracy is this. Say it is 5 centimeters, for example, right? So something that we do is like when we have a third party or like during our estimate phase, our early design phase, we outsource. We may have a third party come in and do mobile LiDAR, right? And LiDAR is significantly more accurate than photogrammetry if you set all these ground truthing and control points. Typically, for an early estimate, we just do relative accuracy. So, depending on that use case, so like we'll do an estimate, we'll pay a sub to come in, get all this information for us that says, hey, within itself, it's great, right? But it's not going to actually match things in the real world. So that gives us the ability to do rough takeoffs where we can do cut fill maps, quantities, that kind of thing, and kind of do some really rough early design work. If we win a project, we'll take that data. We'll have this either that sub come back out if they've got in-house surveyors, or we have our surveyors or another third-party surveyor come back in and then adjust that to absolute accuracy by doing high-level accuracy control on all those ground truthing points and control points that they used originally. So I think
Now, question there. When they're flying the first flight, are they just laying out targets, or do they have something that they can come back and shoot at a later date to make that map like adjust to have some absolute accuracy?
it's a little bit of both. So they'll lay out, so like the sub that we typically use, they will actually mark out some chevrons. It's like
Yeah.
it's a chevron.
A point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a Chevron gas station. Their symbol, that's a chevron. um, they'll mark those out, and then they also may take GPS shots on like hard, easy to identify points, like
Gotcha. Yeah.
this this curb inlet at this location, that kind of thing.
Using something that's not going to move.
Yep. And
Yeah.
then when we come back for that absolute accuracy, they come through with a digital level. They run level loops through all that, and the digital level is like accurate out to like 4 decimal places, right?
Yeah.
So
That's the crazy, like
yeah,
dialed in stuff. Well, I know this doesn't necessarily specifically have to do with drone mapping, but I feel like if people are going to be in this world, it's useful to know the context. Can you describe what a level loop is? Because I remember when I was out there with you and you were talking to your like survey guys, you kept being like, "Yeah, we're going to run a loop on this," and I'm just like, "I don't know what the heck these guys are talking about." So, I mean, I figured it out later, but I think it would have been helpful for people to know when you do need like really like way more than a centimeter, or way more accurate than a centimeter, right? Like really, really narrow accuracy.
yeah,
What do you do for that? Just can you like talk us through what a level loop is?
yeah. So level loop. Trying to think of the best way to explain it is it's a vertical tape measure. So we'll just say we have a benchmark, which is a high accuracy vertical control point that we know whether it's provided by the owner or USGS or the United States Geographic
USGS, yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's US Geological Survey. Yeah.
I know all the acronyms, but I get
Not the words.
but actually, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's like published benchmarks. A lot of cities and municipalities, you can actually go on their city web pages, and it tells you where the benchmarks are that they use throughout the city. So it's a known elevation that you can hold. And so like a level loop is, you set up a tripod, you level out this instrument that you're looking through, a scope, and you're essentially looking at a staff, a rod, a level rod is what it's called. I'm trying not to just use the same words over and over to
No,
describe.
that's fine.
You just, with a level loop, you use a level, look at a level rod, and that's how you run a level loop. But essentially, so the bottom of it's 0, and it has increments. We don't use level rods in inches. They have level rods in all the different units. So survey feet, which is decimal feet, 0.1, 0.2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1 foot. There's inches, and it's got marks down to so if you're using one that you're physically looking through and you have to read it, it's got hash marks that are essentially 1/8 of an inch or 200ths wide, or it's 0.01, 0.02. So it's a hash mark that's 1/8 of an inch thick, and
Okay.
the bottom represents 01, 02.
Sure.
So like we're looking at a benchmark that says this is 100 ground elevation. If we set up our level, we look through and we read 5 foot. What that means is that level is at 105 elevation, right?
You plus 5. Yeah.
Yep, you go +5. So that's what you do. That's called a backsite. You move your level rod to an unknown location, and then you subtract from 105, and that transfers essentially that elevation, your known elevation. Now you're looking, your level's at 105. Now you're reading 6 foot on the rod because you're lower. So you do 105 minus 6. That ground elevation right there, that point you're shooting is 99, right?
Mm-hmm.
105 minus 6. And then you're essentially just hopscotching, and you do what's called a backsite, foresight. So backsite is always a known elevation, foresight is an unknown that you're transferring to. So you go backsite to a foresight, which now becomes your backsite when you move the level, then the foresight, and it's just rinse and repeat.
Now, do you go back to where you started from to make sure that you get back to the original elevation?
Absolutely, every single time. That's called a closed level loop. So even if you have 2 known control points, you have this benchmark is 100 and this benchmark over here is 105 or whatever. If you do a level loop from known to this other known, and it matches, that's great. But a validation is going back to the first one. Because if that tells you if there's any error between those two or something else is going on. That's called the closed level loop. You always want to close it back onto the known point that you started.
Now, with that data, if you have those elevations pretty accurately dialed in, are you ever using those data points in your like photogrammetry stuff, like to check those like elevations in on your map?
Yeah, so like what we've done is, so we started out, most of this was trial and error, trying to figure some stuff out. So like we used the Phantom 4, threw out some arrow points, got inconsistent results because we threw out arrow points in a different location every time, all that kind of crap. And we're like, hey man, this is not the accuracy we thought it was going to be. So then we started moving to put them in that exact same spot every time. And then we transitioned into, I always look at what's the fastest way to do things, and driving around a job site, having to put out targets every time was not efficient to me. So I went, okay, what's the fastest way? Let's paint some permanent spots, mark them, GCPs, shoot them with the GPS. We'll use that northing easting elevation. That's what we're going to use. Then we've kind of transitioned to now on these larger projects to dial in, because that the northing and easting is important, but not as critical as that elevation. So now it's you shoot them with GPS, and then you run through them with the level loop. Throw out the GPS elevation, use that level loop elevation.
So you keep the coordinate like northing easting, but you replace it with your more accurate level loop elevation.
Yeah, because your GPS is much more accurate horizontally than it is vertically. Yeah. So it's an efficient way to tie it down horizontally, and then your level loop really dials it in for vertical accuracy.
Cool. I like that. Sweet. All right. I know I had seen a couple other questions in here that were a little earlier on. Let's see. Here was one about the course. Well, realizing that we just launched it on Tuesday, I don't think it's super widely known industry-wide yet. But I will say that the next step is we have states that we're going to have it to be recognized as continuing education credits for some surveyors and engineers. That's kind of like a state-by-state thing. So,
that's
so
awesome.
if you're going to get it, if you need like most licenses require some continuing education. So we'll have to see how many hours each of those courses qualifies for, but that's our next thing. But yeah, I think, is it recognized by surveyors credible training that would get me a meeting with decision makers? I will say this, you're probably not going to walk into a random surveyor's office and go, oh, I took the advanced drone mapping and modeling training from Drone Launch Academy. Ever heard of it? They're going to be like, what? But I will say this, if you have no background in this and you show them that you have passed some exams and completed training from some other third party, I would imagine that will get you further than just walking in there and just blindly telling them that you can do stuff. So,
and I will say, like, and this is, again, surveyors are a weird bunch. I'm saying that as a surveyor. Like, there's a lot of pushback for surveyors getting into drone, like in construction. Like a lot of our surveyors are like, I don't want to jack with that. That's not a survey thing. Blah 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 blah. Yada yada yada. I think it's important, like this, for you guys, if you're not working directly for a construction company or for a survey firm, and you are trying to get into this world and be able to get this, I think having this knowledge is going to give you the credibility to have call it a competent conversation where they're going to go, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to do the drone part. Because like me personally, love this technology, love doing this stuff, hate flying the drone.
You hate flying the drone?
So I like flying the drone for like videography and taking photos. Yeah. But like from a photogrammetry standpoint, apologize. I'm not trying to like turn you guys off to doing this. But you're just sitting out there changing batteries with most of these.
Yeah.
Like you get some amazing data out, but I start looking at it going, God, I gotta wait 45 minutes to change these stupid batteries. I got other stuff I gotta do. I gotta do this 4 times. I just want to go inside and can't we have somebody else do it? Like, so there's a little
Well,
bit of
most of the hard work is done on either end of it, right? Like the
yeah,
planning, the survey control, doing the flight plan. When you get out there, it's really just, can you follow the checklist, hit the right buttons,
right.
make sure it's not crashing anything, and then the hard work begins afterwards. All the processing.
And I would say that like that's another great point is like getting a competent pilot doesn't have to be the guy that has to know all the advanced mapping information because
Yeah.
it's your setup and then you're after the fact that's going to take care of everything for you. It's like because when everybody thinks drones are cool until you do it like 4 or 5 times, and then everybody I've dealt with is like, "This is terrible. I've got other things to do." Because I think part of that from our standpoint is we don't have a dedicated drone pilot, so it's
So it's
always
like an
like,
extra duty.
yeah, and you're going like, I got cost reports to do. I've got these crews I got to go check on. People are still calling me. I've got emails. I've got meetings to do, and I'm waiting on this stupid thing to change a battery. And so everybody's like, I don't want to do this. Like, I
Um,
do. Depending on the weeks, I go, oh God, I want to go do a 4-hour flight right now because I gotta go. I gotta pay attention to that. Sorry, got to turn my phone off. Leave me
yeah.
alone.
I will say this though, while it's in the air and flying, yeah, you're just sitting there. But I've seen a lot of times, and we were out there, like more stuff than you realize will happen with like you go to get the drone out, and you're like, oh, something's not working. Oh, I need to update the firmware, especially if it's a DJI drone, or like, there's always some, oh, that's this cable isn't connecting correctly, or it's not updating, or especially if like, I guess it's maybe not a problem anymore with DJI drones, but it used to be like, oh, it decided to geofence me out of this
Yeah.
area. It didn't do that last time, but now it's doing it this time. So like being able to troubleshoot a lot of that stuff in the field, or knowing to take care of it before you go out there and double check
Yeah.
it,
We
that can happen a lot.
we've kind of implemented now for like my group and the guys that I deal with is 3 separate checklists, which seems like a pain in the ass. But it's like we do a day before checklist, right? To take care of that stuff. So annoying.
Charge the batteries, clear the SD.
Exactly. Charge the batteries. Do you have an SD card? Is the firmware updated? Did you plug everything in? Do you actually have the cables in the box? Because again, like the other thing is with our team, and you've got 10 to 15 different guys that are going to be flying drones and doing stuff. Is like one guy, somebody, all of our pilots have their own 2 to 3, 4 SD cards that are theirs, extra like USB-C cables to hook up the radio and everything, because never fails. It's like, hey man, where's this cable? Where's this SD card? Oh, dude, that's in my computer, or I got or something.
Oh yeah.
So we do like a day before pre-flight checklist is like, hey, make sure everything's on charge, make sure everything's updated. Because some of the areas we go to is like you're gonna go out there and there's no cell phone service, there's no Wi-Fi, and it's like, hey, update the drone. And it's like,
yeah. Or like you go to load your map up and it's like, oh, I can't load the map,
Yeah. So we do that, and it's like a final check day before is verify your weather and that kind of stuff. And then we actually have a on-site pre-flight checklist that's more specific to the like take it out of the box, take for the love of God, take the lens cap off.
Sorry, I froze up a second.
So many times it's like, hey, we went to process this and they rejected all our photos, or we didn't, like everything's black. And it's like, did you take the lens cap off? No, I think
But
so.
what?
And it's like, well, let's go look at the raw JPEGs. Nope. Like these are all black.
Did you guys fly at night? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a third checklist, which is essentially like, hey, did you upload it? Did you process this? Did you get this information? Did you shoot? If they're using those arrow points, did you upload the arrow points to the propeller deal? Or if you're not using arrow points, it's like, did you shoot the GCPs? Did you actually get those out of the data collector and get those to the guy who needs them to be able to process the data? So I think that's important too, to make sure that you have more than just the FAA flight checklist, right? And you
They don't even
eliminate,
really have checklists.
yeah, not unless you wreck it.
Yeah, right.
Um, I I think doing that like will streamline a lot of stuff for people. Is like if you do those things, it'll like spend the time up front to make those checklists and think of like what are all the friction or failure points I could have. Create those checklists. Everybody's gonna hate doing them, but it's hard to screw up if you follow those checklists. For those kind of things, because that's where like most of the stuff that we see when we see issues with this, photogrammetry, with lidar, with drones, with any of this mapping, is user error doing something goofy. And it's like, well, why didn't you do that? Like the whole picking up the base station and moving it while the drone's in the air, or
Oh, and that's also just a fundamental like understanding, right? Not just saying, "Oh yeah, it's so easy, you don't have to know anything about it, you just push the buttons." But if you actually understand what the things
yeah,
are doing, how it works, how it fits together, you can avoid a lot of those types of mistakes. Have you read the
yeah,
book Checklist Manifesto?
oh yeah, by
Yeah,
Al Gawande. Yeah,
yeah,
I,
great book on that. Just like it's just simply the presence of having a checklist reduces errors dramatically.
yeah.
So hey, real quick, here's a good question. Jay asks, do I need to own my own base station? I've got thoughts, but I'll let you go first.
I would say no. So there's a couple different things you can do. Uh, there's cores networks, continuously operating reference stations. There's VRS. Again, depending on the accuracy and the precision you're looking for, those may work in those solutions. So a lot of states have a free network that you can get signed into. I think there's a couple. I'll have to find them. I think I've got some links that have a list of the states and the logins or the
And
places
you
you go.
Yeah, and you can usually Google that pretty quickly. Like
Yeah,
Florida, they have free in-trip by FDOT for like the whole state and all the different options on there.
and then there's there's you can rent them, right? You can rent like SciTech is kind of the Trimble construction side, and then there's Altera Frontier Precision is kind of the Trimble geospatial side. And then there's Topcon dealers, there's Leica dealers, Geomatic, like all that kind of stuff. There's tons of ways out there. I don't like you don't need to own your own base station. And if it's a permanent project, like a lot of our projects, we set up a permanent base station on site. So you could use, if you're going out there for like a pre construction or an estimate, you're probably not going to have that kind of stuff. You're either going to have to, probably going to have to get with a surveyor or rent some equipment or get something out there. If it's an ongoing project, it's got some surveyors on site, maybe not even. So this project in Indiana, no surveyors on site. They have two base stations permanently set up. One's for the rovers the engineers are using. One is for the machines that are running the Carlson system. So two different base stations permanently pushing out GPS signal. So on those situations too, like if you're providing this for your client, you can have them. I would put that in the contract or talk to them about like, hey, let's set some permanent ground control points. Or when we come out here to fly this, can you shoot with your coordinate system, your information that's tied to your network that you guys have already validated? You shoot these points. We'll use that to process against. So I think no, you don't
Yeah,
need to own your own base station. That's a rather large commitment. I think buying your own base station, depending on the size of your firm, your company, and what you're trying to do.
what about if you're like doing something that needs PPK corrections and you need those observations for that? Like, would you just get them from the company who's got the base stations running already?
There's a couple different ways you have to do that. So most GPS base stations um, don't push out an RTK symbol and collect a PPK or a Rhinex, or there's a couple different names for the
Yeah.
file you need to do PPK processing. So like this project that I was on yesterday in Indiana, If you go out there and go, hey, we flew this, can we get your base information to PPK against? Not going to happen because you
Because
have
they're
to
not like
actually,
logging static data for that time period,
right.
basically.
Now you can say, hey, we need to swap this over and do static data to process against. But most of these don't do them at the same time.
I do know, well, so that's a good perspective from Kiewit. I do know other drone service providers who I don't know what their arrangement is specifically with their clients, but they will have like an MLID RS3 or RS2 or something, or some type of not these crazy expensive receivers that Nate's
Yeah.
talking about over here that are like, 20, 30 grand. You can get an MLID RS2 for like $2,000,
Yeah.
2 or 2,500, something like that.
We're
And it
spoiled.
can like
So,
log static data. Yeah, they're not paying for their own gear. But if you're a drone service provider and you wanted to, let's say, you wanted to feel confident, like they gave you those survey control points, those ground control points, and you just wanted to double check them. You know what I mean? Hey, am I getting something close? And am I understanding these correctly? Or let's say you wanted to have, I'm going to log my own static data to have a backup, in addition to whatever they're doing, whatever it is, you can probably get into that for, $2,000, but you can also rent them. Probably better just to use the data from the people on site, like Nate's saying.
yep.
I do know like Root, who works for the survey company. They always go have their own field crews and surveyors that are getting all the control, and they just provide him the file to implement his stuff.
Yeah.
Here's a good question. What is a base station? You want to give them a little bit of, this is taught in the GNSS course, not necessarily in your course, Nate, but you want to give them a little layman's terms. What is a base station?
Yeah. So base station is essentially the way GPS works is there's, GNSS works. So GNSS, golly, I threw an extra S in there.
GNSS?
Global Navigation Satellite System. So that's all satellites orbiting the Earth, except for probably the top secret ones that people have up there, whatever. But then GPS is the American-owned satellites, like American RAN, that kind of stuff. There's, I think there's a total of 6 or 7 different constellations, whatever, so owned by different companies or countries. Well,
Yeah.
unless you count Elon, he's probably got a bunch of crap up there for Starlink, but whatever.
But I don't think those grab those constellations, does it? Like that, they don't provide positioning data for.
Who knows that?
Do they?
I don't know. Who knows what that guy's doing right now?
I think it's like GPS, GLONASS, Beidou, the Chinese one,
and then there's like
an Indian one.
The Chinese one is, I think it's like QZPP.
Yeah.
It's got, I don't know, probably means something in Chinese, but in English, it's just like a bunch of letters strung together. So you got all these satellites orbiting the Earth. They're constantly moving. The Earth is moving. It's rotating. A base station is a fixed GPS antenna or GNSS antenna that is receiving satellite information. So essentially, this is setting on typically a known point. I know it's this northing, easting in elevation, and it's measuring time against how the satellites are moving and where they're at in the world. And that's calculating and shooting information back, shooting information down, and it's tracking where those satellites are. And then you get into RTK, which is real-time kinematic, which is essentially that little rover, the little wizard stick that surveyors use. So when they go out there and move, that's getting a radio signal from that fixed base position, which is getting corrections from the satellites that's moving, and then it's shooting out to the rover to tell them where exactly that is in the world. So think of that as the base station is the fixed intermediate antenna to capture GPS information from the satellites orbiting the Earth, and then usually to send it to it's either collecting data for PPK and saying, hey, this is where all the satellites are in the world, to then like get a super, super tight and accurate and precise location on something, or it's shooting out RTK to somebody that's on the move, and it's giving them real-time corrections. That's what the RTK essentially is doing. Is think about your GPS on your phone, right? So as you're using Google Maps and it's constantly updating your little blue dot floating around, that's what RTK is. And it's running off a fixed known point base station.
Yeah. Um, and I'm guessing many of you know this, but maybe if you don't, there are when we say PPK and RTK, those are different ways of correcting the
Yep.
satellite signal because when satellite signals come in, they're always going to have some type of error in there because literally it's receiving a signal from thousands of miles away. And when it sends that signal, it's the satellite's like, hey, here's the time that I sent this signal out, and then your receiver's reading that message like constantly from tons of different satellites. But on the way in, it like can slow down or sped up based on the atmosphere. It can bounce off of other stuff. There's other thing called like clock delays or pseudo. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that could be off by just a little bit. Shocker! It's coming from thousands of miles away. It might be a foot off. You know what I mean? But these things do crazy math to figure out. Okay, if all this data is coming in here, and I know this is a real point on Earth, it does all the math to figure out what the differences are, and it knows, okay, based on all the conditions that are happening right now at this moment, we need to shift this signal, 4.2 inches to the east or whatever. And then it takes that, that's how it knows the correction, and then it can send that correction information to whatever is around it. So when you hear RTK, that's happening. They have sort of like base stations in other places, and they can kind of simulate what the corrections need to be at a certain point and
Yep.
adjust your drone data. So, um, cool. That's a good question. Um, Ryan asks, in your opinion, is selling deliverables to construction pros easier or more likely to happen than to surveyors?
Probably going to be easier for your construction teams, honestly. So, like your survey teams, like if you're looking at a survey firm, most, I, I say most, I haven't talked to all of them or a whole lot of them, but like a survey firm is going to be more likely to do their own in-house drone stuff and create those deliverables that they're going to give to a client. Uh, your
I
const-
would I would say on that side, just from talking to knowing Root and being a little bit involved in what he's doing, they're using him more in like the middle steps. So they're always going to be responsible for like the end deliverable that they're giving to their client.
yeah,
They are using him to be like, hey, we normally go do all this field work either by hand or by manned aircraft or whatever other source they have. They're using him as a way to capture more data and do it a little faster. He's actually training them to, like, in a year, build out their own in-house team so they can do it. But in the meantime, he's sort of like, they set control. He goes out, does all the data collection, helps them with the processing, gives them sort of like intermediate deliverables that they need in order to create their final product that they're going to turn over to their clients, whether that's like a tin surface or help them with a topographic survey, something, or contours.
yeah,
So they're like, hey, we need these specific sort of exports or deliverables from your drone data that you used our control with. Then they have their guys go out there and do check shots too to validate the information, and then they make their final deliverables off of that, which is what they're getting paid for. So you're kind of like the middle step in the survey world, whereas in the construction world, you might be a little bit more of like, I don't know what, when you're using third-party contractors, Nate, the kind of deliverables you get from people.
yeah. It kind of depends. Typically, we are getting that. We ask for everything.
Yeah.
if if somebody goes out and flies a job site for us, we just ask for everything because we have we're not we're so Kiewit is so large, and we've got this beautiful freedom to kind of use whatever we want to do. So we have people that are using Bentley projects or products, which is a CAD system. We have people using AutoCAD stuff. We have people using just Trimble Business Center. We have people using all these different programs that take all these different formats. So if we hire somebody, typically in our contract, we go, hey, give us all the raw files that you get, all the information. That way, no matter who we give it to on our team, they'll be able to use the data or do whatever they need to do with it. Because we ran into lots of issues before where it's like you hire somebody and they give you only one version of the deliverable. Nobody has the knowledge or the capability to convert that, doesn't know how to do it correctly or whatever.
Yeah. Um, cool. Someone asked if I wanted to do drone work. I think this got answered in the chat too, but maybe we can get your take on it, Nate from construction side. If I want to do work for a construction company, who's my most reliable point of contact? Maybe you're the most effective point of contact.
So it kind of depends. I think the toughest part is, I would say, like doing networking first on LinkedIn, honestly, because that's the biggest deal, is reaching out and getting in touch with people.
Dude, that's how we met, honestly.
Yeah.
I randomly messaged Nate on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, we're thinking about doing these courses. Will you just take a look at it? And you responded. I was like, oh, sweet.
The other thing is, like, it's gonna sound crazy, but like you see a surveyor or you see a construction site, is like, pull over and ask somebody, hey, do you guys have a contact? Do you have like a person I could talk to about some stuff? And typically most of us, like, we have a very strict policy where if you stop on one of our projects and you're like, hey, I want to talk to somebody, we're like, hey, here's our public information guy. Here's a card. Reach out to this guy, and then you can kind of talk to him and get the ball rolling that way.
Okay.
We have people all the time walk into our construction sites, like the offices, that kind of thing, go, hey, this is what we're doing. And that's how we develop a lot of relationships and contacts with people too. So
pretty common thing, people walking into the office, like the trailers on the construction sites.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, because a lot of our sites, like, so the past couple of ones we've been doing in DFW, they're 20-mile projects that are just wrecking people's worlds.
Because you're doing roadway stuff, right?
Yeah. So on those ones, like, you get business owners coming in and stuff and going, hey, this is what we need
to complain.
Oh yeah, we get complaints all the time. There's nothing like being threatened by some business owners, and love it. It's like a Taco Bell situation. We get vendors that come in all the time. Like, they'll drive by, see a construction site, they'll try to find out where the office is, and you just get random vendors coming in, right? And so depending on how you present yourself, and I think having like I was saying earlier, being able to have a competent, conversation and say, hey, this is what we can do. Here's what I can provide for you. Are you guys doing this? And honestly, like, if you're looking to get on with a construction firm too, after having this knowledge, not just be a third-party provider. We've hired people that have walked in and be like, hey, this is the skills I have. Do you guys need this? And it's like, actually, we're looking for some permanent people that can do that. So
that might be a good segue here into Constantino. He's talking about the courses necessarily, but the really core of this question is, what's the benefit of trying to get hired sort of like as a third-party drone service provider versus working for a company and having them pay for your training?
I think it's kind of we're in a weird spot right now, I think, with like larger companies, is not just for drones. Like, we don't technically, Kiewit as a whole does not have a drone program or a here's how you do it. Here's like
an official drone program coordinator.
This is the people we go to or whatever. But we are trying to, a lot of these larger companies are trying to do that and build their internal, because we're getting more and more contracts that are like, we want these aerial photographs on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis.
That's dictated by the contract that you're bidding for.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of contracts that if we don't provide aerials every month, they can withhold payment. So it's like, it can actually cause major issues.
So it's almost like drone work is being built in as a requirement now to just even get the job.
Because if you think of it like drones now versus before drones became so mainstream and so easily accessible, as we were hiring pilots to do flyovers every 6 months or whatever. But now it's like, hey, if the weather's good, I can have updated imagery on my project every couple of days or once a week, right? And so clients are using that more and more too. For, the big thing is month end. So that's kind of the thing too, is
like billing stuff or what?
Yeah. So like, talk to again, kind of going back to like the construction company and like cold calling and walking in is asking like, hey, how do you guys true up or validate your month end quantities and your month end progress? And it's like, well, we use all these spreadsheets and blah 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 blah. But a lot of times it's like we're starting to use drones and just the aerials to go, hey, you can see we built X amount of lineal foot. We've done this. You need to pay us for this, and submitting that to the client. But the client's also using that too. And that's the other thing too is talk to DOTs, a lot of DOTs, and sell this to them. Like, hey, you pay me to do this for you. We can actually see what your contractor has built. So for month end, you can go, hey, we're not paying you for that because we got a picture from yesterday. It's not,
Validating it from the other end.
it's not 100% complete. So that, there's some things you can do like that.
Cool.
I think there definitely is benefit to getting hired into a company as a pilot and pitching the certification course. I think you're going to have more luck doing that with your larger companies, your Kiewits, your Balfour Beatty, your Bechtel, those kind of things that may not have that stuff set up.
Yeah. Just from my end of just seeing a lot of different companies, and I talked to a lot of drone service providers. I talked to all of the enterprise clients we have, so I kind of get to see a combo. I am surprised how many big companies still often will hire out, like even if they have their own. Some of them have like their own like core internal drone program, maybe where they have like a small set of people to kind of manage what they're doing, maybe go out to different projects from time to time. But if they need like continuous updates from a site, like they may only have this project out here for a year, so it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to like hire a permanent employee out there for a year. They'll just like, okay, we'll just get a third party to do that work for us, and they'll kind of just coordinate with them on that. So I've seen some of that. But you're right. I think in the last 2 years, I've seen a big uptick, or it seemed like a lot of big companies, it was like you had to kind of continue to sell it to them or convince them of like, hey, this can help. And this is, and I feel like they're finally starting to realize like, oh, we should just be doing this. And they just start doing it a lot more internally. Like you said, like, y'all's usage has gone up by like 4x. I've seen so many more companies similarly be like, okay, we're going to get on the train now. And it's becoming a more accepted practice.
I think Steve had a good point too about being a contract employee. There's because to your point is, talking about seeing more value in it. The problem we're running into too, like now, is the reason we're starting to do more internal is it sucks having to do this as like part of my job, like on top of everything else. Same thing for our engineers, some of our surveyors, that type of thing. But paying $160 to get somebody licensed, FAA certified, training them up versus hiring somebody that to come out every single week is we're going to pay them $2,000 per trip to do one drone flight. And it's like, hey man, I'm paying this guy $1,500 a week to do way more than one drone flight. I can just stack that on top of him. So like if you can set up some sort of contract with some sort of reasonable pricing, because that's what we've kind of seen and why we've started going a little bit more internally is like you talk to some of these outside deals and it's like, whoa, by the end of this project, we're going to spend $400,000 on just having a dude fly a drone. It's like, how many people could, we could get people certified. How many drones could we pay for, doing that ourselves internally? So I think that's part of the dichotomy that you guys are going to be fighting against a little bit too. It's like, you don't want to price yourself out of the market. It's not so bad for an emergency situation or, one off.
And I'm like, hey, who are y'all talking to? We're going to pay $400,000 for
well,
drone flights. Jeez, maybe I'm going to quit this and go fly for you guys.
well, it depends on the length of the project, how often you want the information, right?
Sure.
I think there was, I can't remember the company we talked to, but it was almost $1,000 a trip. So you go,
Gotcha.
okay, we're doing that once a week for a year on a 6-year project. And it's like, oof,
Oh, I see. Oh, you mean like over years. I see. Yeah. Well, I think like if you have but in that term, you're looking at a 6-year project with a ton of ongoing work. So it just like, it's like they always talk about buy or build. It's how companies think about things like, hey, do I want to just acquire this other company who knows how to do this, or should we just build this competency internally, right? Same thing with services. Like, hey, am I going to have enough work to do this where it makes sense to just hire and train some up people internally? Or is this like, a 6-month job, and it doesn't make sense for us to hire someone to only have work for them for 6 months. So I think there are plenty of I don't know, maybe you could say otherwise, but there are so many construction and grading and just mid-level or smaller companies that probably are not going to have their own internal drone teams that
Yeah,
maybe would be a better target for people to work for.
yeah. I think it's going to be easier to sell individual deliverables to a smaller company, but I think like a contract employee for a larger company, but you're going to have to look at your pricing and how you do that, right? Because you
Yeah.
don't want to undersell yourself um, just to get a long term contract with the company,
Yeah.
right? But
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
but it's like you can't. It's tough because it's again with everything and so with the market so saturated with being able to get drones and MLID receivers and that kind of stuff. So I hate to say cheap, like, oh, look at me. I spent,
No,
you
yeah.
know, 20 grand on a drone and some receivers and all this stuff, and I'm good to go. I know that's still a large investment, but like compared to what it used to be to get pilots out there to fly things and that kind of stuff, like it's starting to turn into a very competitive market, I feel like. And it's so like make sure your pricing is on point, make sure that you can explain what all benefits that you're providing to these clients, to these customers. Um, and two, part of it is like the knowledge that you have with understanding like, hey, here's the accuracy and precision I'm able to provide. This is what you're paying for. You're not paying because the other thing is like by the time you talk to these decision makers, they're thinking, I'm paying for a stupid picture. I'm not paying $1,000 a week for a picture. And it's like, bro, you're not paying for a picture. You're paying for this accuracy and this and the ability to be doing this and X and Y and Z and all that kind of information. So I think that's super important to understand like everything that this mapping drone can do. And like that goes back to like using your imagination to go, okay, and like spending some time just chill on it. Well, not on the construction site. That's a good way to get in some trouble. But like watch what they're doing and going, okay, if I had a 3D map of this, how could I help them with their efficiencies too? Because a lot of the things that we notice is like we talk about doing cold eye reviews, is going to a job site you've never been to before, watching an operation and going, have you guys tried this or thought about this or done this? And a lot of times it's like, oh man, we're so tunnel vision on getting stuff done. It takes somebody else to just sit back, even if you don't have the deep construction knowledge, to look at it and go, well, that seems silly. Why don't they do this? And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
crap, we didn't think about that.
And a tip for people, so if you're in the construction world, a lot of the stuff will sort of be apparent to you. Like if you think about, here's what drones can do. I know that everything that happens on the site, you can kind of start to, like Nate does, you're like going, oh, we could use it for this or for this. But if you're outside of the construction world, this is like any industry or market that you want to get into. If you're like a business owner, if you want to provide services to someone and you're not in their world on a very regular basis, it's hard to know how to communicate. Here's exactly how this helps because you can use it like this and all these different use cases. So you sort of just have to invest some time into trying to immerse yourself a bit more there. So things that I've found helpful are go to conferences or like, hey, your local, Florida contractors convention or whatever. Like go there. People will talk about problems. People will do sessions about projects they're working on. Sort of just absorb the lingo, absorb the language. Shoot, listen to podcasts on whatever, on
Yeah,
surveying, on engineering, construction, whatever. Like the more you can absorb of the lingo, the language, being around people, you'll start to, and the more conversations you can have, like, listening to this, I'm sure it's helpful for a lot of you, but if you can have these conversations and understand the kind of things people deal with on a day-to-day basis, you'll start to put more of those pieces together as to like, oh, okay, here are their real pain points, or here's what they're wasting time on, or here's what they complain about. Here's how I think drones can help. And you just kind of have to be willing to maybe look a little dumb at first and ignorant if but asking questions is the fastest way to learn stuff. So,
yeah,
uh, and also, shameless plug. That's one of the reasons why we made the course is that you would know exactly, like, hey, here's how people are using it. Here's what deliverables look like. Here's how they get them.
yeah.
Um, cool. Are there team members under you guys that we can reach out to if we have more questions? I mean, honestly, this is your best bet to get your questions answered. And we have our like internal drone launch team that we can answer, decent questions. But if you have like really detailed construction engineering questions, like that's usually the best for the people we bring on as instructors, and we do things like this to kind of let you guys get your questions answered. We can help best we can, but I don't employ a team of 10 surveyors to respond to people's emails necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Um, I would say give me a little bit of grace, but like hit me up on LinkedIn, send me a message, and I will try to get back to you. I'm a big proponent of sharing my knowledge. But I was brought up under a bunch of guys that were super protective and didn't want to share knowledge, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. So, like, I love having talks like this, conversations, trying to troubleshoot stuff, help people. Um, so, I mean, hit me up if you guys do have questions, and I'll try to respond as soon as possible. But again, but bear with me. Like the past couple hours between travel and working, or days rather, have been like 20-ish hours for about the past 3 days between all the goofy traveling I've been doing and actually on the job site. So I'm a little like a little loopy right now.
Well, I appreciate you taking the
probably
time to do this.
probably a bunch of like emails behind. Like Matthew, yes, I saw your email, saw your note. I'm not ignoring you or ghosting you. I actually have it flagged to respond to you later. Matthew works at Kiewit too. Hit me up.
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw. It sounds like there's at least one or two Kiewit folks here in the chat, which is pretty funny. I guess they're a pretty huge company, so it's not totally surprising. Well, we're going on an hour and 40 minutes here, so I don't want to. I know you just flew back in from your crazy last minute travels, so but we can start to wrap it up. Just if you guys are interested in jumping in the course that Nate taught, along with the other stuff about geodesy and understanding GNSS and survey control, and then even some of the stuff with land surveying, our launch kind of period goes through Monday night. I was originally going to make it Friday night, but I was like, let's kick it out past the weekend so people can kind of have to be able to take more time to look through stuff to see if it's going to help them or not. So, so you guys can sign up. You can find it on the website. All the pricing's on there, or you can just go to mappingdeal.com. I bought that domain. It was available. And so that just automatically redirects to the page that has the discount on it. So that's all live until Monday at midnight Eastern time. So 9 p.m. on the West Coast if you guys are interested in that. But no, I appreciate Nate coming on. It kind of worked out, honestly, that you couldn't do the last one because because it would have just been hard to fit everything in to just a one. Because I had Root on there too, and he talked through some of their deliverables, and we presented some other stuff. So it was kind of nice. I got to double dip, so we got to do that. That was probably about 2 hours long. Then we get another chance to talk, and this one, we almost been about an hour 35. So
Awesome.
Yeah, it's great. Cool. Well, appreciate everyone coming in here. Let's look at some just real last minute questions before we go, if you're cool with that, Nate.
Yeah.
And if there are none, then we can go. But yeah, thanks. I appreciate everybody's kind words in the comments. Let's see here. Were there questions? Let's see. Yeah, everybody follow Nate on LinkedIn. Get him. We need to pump him to 10,000 followers.
Oh, good Lord.
Nate, we got to get you putting out some content on there. I want to see some short form video content. Maybe.
So I thought about it. I'm actually
TikTok dances or something.
My daughter would love that. She's trying to get me to use Snapchat, and I was like, oh man. For me, I'm not. I've got a bunch of social media junk, but it's I don't. Dude, I have a side business.
Are you talking about your cooking?
Yeah, I bake. I have my food license to actually do baking. Love
this
cooking.
Man's a serious cheesecake connoisseur, guys.
So actually, I think it's on the Instagram or one of Propeller's social media sites. Is when I went up there and spent a week with them in Sydney, I made it was 60 or 70 cinnamon rolls, a bunch of pans of cinnamon rolls in their kitchen. And they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, you guys got a kitchen, and I'm gonna cook." But
This man, he showed me photos of every cheesecake imaginable. He's like, yeah, I made that. I made that. And these are like, these cheesecakes, you could throw these bad boys at the Cheesecake Factory and they would blend right on, if not be like, is this your featured cheesecakes? I mean, these things were like, you got everything dialed in. They look nice. It's great. So,
people eat with their eyes first, and so I think this is part of like I will say too, like for surveyors, and this is part of like our personalities is we are super perfectionist. Like like I don't mean to sound full of myself, but like consider myself a good surveyor. But like good surveyors are like very detail oriented. Um, it bleeds over into my cooking, and like if stuff doesn't look good, I'm like, we should throw that away, which drives my wife nuts. And she's like,
we'll throw it away.
I'm like, we can't give that to anybody. It's garbage. And she's like, it tastes good, but
That's great.
no,
Um,
I would say too, like to your point about the two different sessions, like that would with Root talking for about the deliverables and everything. That actually you got me to thinking too. Is like there's like two big pieces to drones and drone mapping, and there is a very heavy survey side, and then there's like the deliverable side and everything else too. And going back to the podcast is like there's a podcast for surveyors called Geoholics. It's a good one to listen to. It's Diamondback Land Surveying out of
they were
Arizona.
at they were at Geo Week in Denver. I saw their
Yeah,
booth.
they're kind of the the most comparable thing I can think of is kind of nerdy sounding, but it's like Joe Rogan for surveyors.
Okay, is it like I haven't listened to it. Is it a pretty well respected podcast?
Yeah, I mean they're huge. They're sponsored by Trimble, Leica, a bunch of stuff.
Okay,
NSPS, National Society of Professional Surveyors. So they've got a podcast. I would say if you want to get really into the weeds for some great like survey knowledge, Trent Keenan. So he's got Mentoring Mondays. That's for people studying to take their licensed surveyor exam. But they talk about all sorts of survey stuff. There's Wisdom Wednesdays. Um, I
okay,
think that's the one where they essentially licensed surveyors talk to each other. I think it's every couple of weeks. It's like an open round table where they throw out a problem, somebody's real world problem, surveying problem, and everybody works together to try to solve it.
cool.
But Trent's got three different ones. That's going. I can't remember the other one.
Okay, what was his name? Trent what?
Trent Keenan.
How do you spell the last name? I'll just throw it in the chat. Like
I
Key
think it's
K E E.
Keenan.
I did see a couple questions other than what's your LinkedIn profile, which I threw in the chat. Sorry, Nate, but people would find it anyways. Someone asked, I don't know the answer to this question. If I get the certification, would I be eligible for surveyor and training positions? I feel like you probably
Yeah.
need
So your
others.
SIT requires a bunch of land surveying experience or college education or high school education, that kind of thing. And then taking your FS, the fundamentals of surveying test.
Yeah.
So there's some very specific stuff you got to do for that surveying training.
Yeah. This course is not meant to make you a surveyor by any means. The main purpose of the course is twofold. One, if you're when I say course, I mean like the whole program. If you are a drone service provider and you're wanting to work with surveyors, engineers, and then when we do release the 3D modeling course in about 2 months from now, doing digital twins for bridge inspections or facade or whatever, to make you a very valuable drone operator that understands the context of these different industries, what's important, and you have a foundational knowledge of all the geodesy and the positioning and all that stuff. So when you go into these conversations, you're knowledgeable and you can be sort of an asset to them versus, oh, this is just a drone guy who thinks he can help us and he doesn't understand what we deal with at all. So that's one end. And then on the other end is people who are in these professions already, and maybe they know some of this knowledge. Maybe there's a little few gaps in there that we can fill in for them, but then how all of this applies when you're using the drone and how you're going to use the drone to create some of these deliverables that they might already be familiar with, and it's kind of fill them into how the drone piece fits with it. So those two sides kind of combining. It's not meant to turn you an engineer, turn you into a surveyor. There are already pathways for that in schools and all these other things. This is sort of try to bridge the gap to connect everything with drones.
Yep. I would say, like,
Uh,
if you're looking for a career in surveying and in construction, definitely DM me on LinkedIn because we're taking on a massive amount of work and we're going to need a bunch of surveyors very soon.
there you go. And I know that, so another one, some of our customers is like Dominion Energy, and they're like, I was talking to so they're an example, like they have a drone program and they have a drone program manager, and they do some of their own like internal training too. But we provide all of their like Part 107 training. And he's like, I was talking to their program manager, and he's like, yeah, we're hiring, we need somebody, he's like a licensed surveyor in Virginia who can also do drone stuff and blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'll send you the job posting. So like there's people out there trying to fill these roles too.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would say too, be very careful with pay attention to the state you're in and what the regulation and rules are. I think it's North Carolina. There's a
yeah, that's the
court
main
case
one.
about not wanting people to do drone mapping unless they were a licensed surveyor. Kind of a weird deal because
Yeah. They were arguing in North Carolina that any type of mapping project, they're literally saying like basically any picture from the sky that anyone may or may not make measurements off of is a survey product, and that you need to be a licensed surveyor,
how's
which
that work for Google Earth, I wonder.
that's what I was wondering. It seems like a little bit of an overreach, or a little
Yeah.
stretch to me. I can understand like stamping stuff or like kind of making some type of accuracy claims or any of that, but
Oh, I
even
will
if
say,
it's just a, yeah, go ahead.
but part of that I think ties into like just for like surveying in general is there is a massive need right now for surveyors across the United States, actually globally. Um, like the average age of licensed surveyors, I think, is like 55 or 60 right now. Um,
Mhm.
and there's a bunch of legislature trying to make it a little bit easier to get licensed. So there's a lot of guys involved in some of that are pushing for more things to be tied into like you have to be licensed to do that. So it's kind of a weird spot. Instead of getting more people to be surveyors, we're just trying to make more stuff where it's like you can't do that unless you are one, and
Yeah.
kind of a
But
weird
I
deal.
do know that I mean, I've talked every person I've talked to about this is like, man, there's massive shortage of surveyors. Every survey firm that I know of is like slammed with work. And
Yeah,
I think that's if you do want to do the drone side of things, that is something that will be to your advantage if you want to talk to them and say, hey, listen, I mean, I can send you guys, there was a report. It was done in 2015. This is before drones were even good. And they compared manual fieldwork time to just doing the same collection with a drone. They recorded the whole process, start to finish, where the cost savings were, where the time savings were. There wasn't really any time savings on the processing side because you're going to have to, whatever, process data, whether it's, you're doing grid by, hand with field crews or whatever. Um, but the 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 data collection process went from like 8 hours of field work, people doing it manually in the field, versus it was like 18 minutes with a drone for this like certain site.
yeah.
And so if you want to learn this work, it'd be great to partner with a survey company, especially smaller ones who are just
Yeah.
like, I don't have the time or the resources, manpower to figure this out. You could partner with them to say, hey, let me kind of basically do like what Root's doing. Let me do the drone work for you. Or, hey, let me just work with your firm over the next year. I can start to do the drone work at the beginning, and then I can maybe train up some of your internal staff on how to take this over, and help you guys build out a drone functionality or capacity or whatever. So there's definitely
Well,
opportunities like that.
and I think there's a massive need for that as well. One of the things that we actually had a deal come up probably about a month ago with a client who actually has a internal drone program for their company, and our estimators and everybody was selling like, hey, we're going to use drones and all this technology, and they said, hey, what is your corporate drone program and policies and all that? And we didn't have a real good defined one, so I had to help create one with another guy so we could actually work for this company. So there's a massive need right now for a lot of companies, and more private owners are asking contractors to provide more detailed information and have some sort of program in place. So like there's a big need for that, I think, with medium to large companies as well.
Yeah. I spoke at Geo Week. I spoke with the surveyor. He does a lot of training, so I've met him before. and he said, I wrote down what he said because I was like, I just want to quote this. He was like, yeah, he's like, there's so many like 2 to 4 man survey companies out there that just are, you know, they're so slammed.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a catch-22. Like they're so busy they can't find the time to figure out the technology,
Yeah.
but if they don't, it's going to cause some serious issues for them, in the upcoming years. And so they're probably nearing where they might want to sell the firm or retire or whatever. So this is like there's a lot of opportunity right now. And as Tech Knucklehead, I can't imagine that's your true first and last name, but
Yeah, I hope it
you
is. That would be
show me
awesome.
your birth certificate. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great that you're doing that. I think that's a huge opportunity right now.
Yeah.
As long as, but what you're going to find is, I know a lot of, at least from what I've heard, a lot of survey firms are skeptical on accuracy. They're like, I don't think you can get data that's good enough for us to use.
Wait,
So be be willing to say like, hey, well, then give me a chance. Let me collect data, and then you go do your own check shots, and let's take a look at it.
yeah.
So
And I think that
there you
comes
go.
back to that kind of ties into you're not going to be accurate and precise without the appropriate ground control, ground truthing, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind too. And that's where I think this course will really help get you that knowledge and understanding of that, because that it happened to us, right? Internally at Kiewit is I had that knowledge when we started doing drones, so like we overkilled it with control and that kind of thing. And then other internal projects would reach out and go, drones are terrible, they're absolute garbage. And it would be the same situation that we kind of looked at it with that solar farm I was talking about that had one, one ground control point for 1,600 acres. And they're like, this drone is terrible. And it's like, no, your processes and everything are what the issue is, not the drone, right? So I think that's super important is if you are going to say like, hey, let me prove it to you, make sure that you have the right processes in place to actually get the accuracy and get that consistency.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, guys, I'll see if I can sucker Nate into doing another Q&A session down the road sometime. I enjoy doing this. I always, learn a
I
lot
do
and
too.
enjoy chatting.
I like doing this kind of stuff. I love discussing this kind of thing. I think like I said, that the importance of one getting knowledge out there, because I think that's one of the things that's like very close to me. Like this Indiana project, they wanted to do the right thing. They just didn't have the knowledge, and then have somebody that spoke with them and talked with them and helped them out with this. So they're out there, everybody's heart in the right place, trying to do the right thing. I'm very passionate about like having these conversations or trying to ask questions and help people get off on the right foot and make sure we're doing things, because again, like from a survey standpoint, like all I have is my reputation and my accuracy of the work that I provide to people. So it's very important that like as you guys are getting into this stuff, you're keeping that in mind, because it's very easy to oversimplify this technology and get yourself into trouble. And that's kind of the dichotomy of this too. Is technology does we ran the same deal on a job site. That first project, 200 acres, manually topoing and that with all the information that we are getting with the drone and using with the drone. Took 45 minutes to fly with the drone, processed it in 12 hours, right? So you're 13 hours all in versus doing the same thing manually would have taken us a week and a half, 2 weeks. So we're like, holy crap. So making sure that we're getting that consistent, accurate data, because as soon as that data isn't accurate or something happens and you can't explain or troubleshoot why that happened, everybody's like, screw this drone program, go back and do it old school. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, the 12 hours of processing is usually just a wait time, right? You're not actually, it's
Yeah.
cloud-based.
Yeah.
So,
That was and now it's down to like, golly, some of these are doing it in like 5 to 6 hours with some of the computing that they're doing now. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's just getting faster.
Constantino did have one sort of niche question here, but he's seeing positions for field engineer for field operations. Is that enough to get me in and work into drones with Kiewit? Field engineer has been my title for the past 10 years.
Yeah, probably. Hit me up. and I can get you some contacts. Like I said, if you guys are interested in working for Kiewit,
Is
we
Drone Launch Academy just going to be a recruiting arm for Kiewit at this point, I think?
have. So we've actually hired some guys, some surveyors. By like some of our surveyors have been driving down the street and been like, "Oh shoot, surveyor!" And they turn around, pull over, and go, "Hey man, you looking for a career change?"
That's awesome. Love it. Oh no, Javier, the course expired Monday night. Monday night. So it's Thursday. You got the weekend and Monday. So you're certainly welcome to get in now and get going. Somebody signed up Tuesday night and already has finished the Geodesy course, got their certificate. I think that might have finished the second course too. I was like, man, they are plowing through it. I saw them throw it on LinkedIn. I was like, wow, nice. Cool. All right, everyone. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nate.
Yes, Brandon, you can get licensed in multiple states.
Oh yeah.
It's called
reciprocity.
Reciprocal license, I think. Once you get licensed in one state, right? Don't do Texas first. It's a beating. You got to take 3 tests for it now. There's like the national test, the FS, that every state recognizes. Then there's like Texas has a state specific. Texas is so proud of itself. We got a state specific surveying test, and then another one, reciprocity. Yeah, reciprocal licensing. But like once you get it in one state, you can actually go to another state too, and do that as well. And it's more about not necessarily. It's not going to be about. It's going to be the legal aspects that you're studying for the new state, the laws and everything that you're doing there.
Yeah, he's looking at Idaho, Washington, and Montana. It looks like. Steve says Indiana has the same 3 tests.
Oh, it's so goofy. We're like some of these states are so freaking proud of themselves. And Texas, like our specific state test has like I am not licensed. I've been looking at it and getting into it to get my license, but like there's so many different units of measurement and like the Spanish use Spanish/Mexican varos and all this other crap that no other states have. That's part of Texas history, and we're like, I'm originally from Las Vegas, not a Texan. My wife says I'm a Texan now because we've lived here for so long. She's a true native Texan. Like, if you haven't dealt with native Texans, they are so proud of Texas in their state.
Yeah. Like, Texas is cool, though. I like Texas. I've been there a lot over the last few years.
I like it.
It's windy, that's for sure. Every time I go out there, dude, it's like crazy wind. So I didn't tell you this. Nate, do you know Dusty Jolly? Have you met him? He's like the community manager for Drone Launch Connect.
I don't think I did.
Yeah, he did that part-time. He just got a job with a big drone program, and they're doing all this stuff. It was funny. He was talking about it. He's like, got into it. He's like, dude, I need to get in these courses now. They're talking about geoid models and all this stuff, and I got to catch up. But he went out to Texas. Dude, he was over in Fort Worth. He was down close to Aledo. They were doing a golf course over there. And, dude, he showed me they had an M350. And he's like, we almost had to stop because it was so windy. Dude, the thing is flying like this to just try to fly in a straight line. And I remember we were out there with the wing jets. It's like, it's always crazy windy out there. So.
I'll have to, that's what I'll do is I'll post some of that on LinkedIn. It's like every time it's windy and the wing trip's coming down, I whip out my phone because it's like that wing trail. It's supposed to come down and land, and I've got videos of it where it's like coming down and it's hovering above the ground. And at the last minute, it goes flat, and I'm like, oh god, we're about to snap this thing in half.
Can I tell you a funny thing about Wingtra? So I was talking to them. If you guys aren't familiar with Wingtra, they're like a pretty popular fixed wing drone for like larger area mapping. So
based out
like
of Switzerland,
yeah. So like they're quadcopters you use to, like, let's say DJI stuff. You got 4 propellers typically, and if you let go of the controls, it just hovers in place. And then so if you're flying, if you sees an obstacle, you can just stop and go around it. It's a little bit easier to control. But if you have a fixed wing drone or a Wingtra, it requires forward movement to get wind over the wings to keep it in the air, like an actual airplane. So there's less forgiveness when it comes to like not planning your routes correctly, or dodging obstacles. Well, in mining operations like quarries and stuff, they want to get it's a little bit, maybe a little bit closer to get a good resolution, right? So someone was designing a flight plan to kind of like fly their transition down, like they're flying here and then they transition, so like do some spirals to decrease the altitude to go down into like a quarry area to then fly some lines and then come out. Well, they didn't position it the right thing, and they just took the wing and smashed it right into the wall of like the side of the quarry or whatever. I was talking to the guy and he said, yeah, my customer called me and says, hey, the drone wrecked. And he's like, oh no, like, was that our bad? Like, was it a software thing? Like, I think it might be under warranty. He's like, I don't think the warranty is going to cover what I did to it. So you got to be careful when you're planning that stuff.
Yeah, we did that. One of our pilots, and this is the other thing too, is if you guys are going to work with multiple pilots, um, do not trust the flight plan that's in there. Like, make that part of your checklist. We had multiple pilots flying on a project, and one guy, they were just copying the same flight plan, and somebody had edited. They edited the flight plan. Jeez. Dude went out and flew it, didn't pay attention. It had been lowered like 150 foot, slammed into an FCC tower.
Ooh. Yeah, gotta double check.
Wasn't paying attention to where it was at and called me and was like, hey man, I've been sitting here for an hour and a half and the drone hasn't come back.
So much for line of sight, right?
And I was like, it's a 45-minute battery life. And so we had to drive around, and we were driving and we're like, hey, is that it over in the fence, like 300 foot off the
Oh gosh.
We had another thing. I mean, how about you? Auto flights, Brandon, terrify me, especially when you have like people that are just, this is another deal to do on top of my day job. We're building a bunch of border fence here in Texas. They ran a wing truck into the only structure out there, the one we built, the border fence. Like, how did we hit the border fence? I'm like, we put it there, guys.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff that you can do.
Robin, we gave I think there's a free lesson within each course. We're going to leave those open. I'll probably just leave those open for the foreseeable future so people can kind of just get a feel to see. You can watch that lesson, but the other nice thing is it kind of puts you inside the course so you can look through the rest of the detailed outline to see what's in there to get a better feel for it.
Yeah.
Steve asks, maybe a little from the outside, what kind of money is possible or normal in this field? I assume he's probably talking about from a drone service provider standpoint. I don't know if if you're very knowledgeable on that, Nate.
I am not. Like I said, we've talked to a couple of outside third party, but I don't know, man. I heard
I'll say this.
I heard
go ahead.
about a kid from Arkansas whose parents, he actually has his license, his legit pilot's license. Parents are rich, or his grandparents are rich. But talking to our Trimble vendor from SciTech up there, licensed surveyor, good friends with him, he said, yeah, this 19-year-old kid has his pilot's license, flies down to Louisiana, does a bunch of, I think he's using a DJI, and then flying back, does a couple job sites down there, and he's making 30-40 grand a month. I don't know who his clients are and what all he's doing, but I think depending on that clientele, again, if you're looking at ExxonMobil has third party guys fly their stuff, a lot of the oil fields, oil pads, that kind of stuff. There's massive amounts of data centers going in across the country now, and plants for that kind of stuff to support all this AI and this infrastructure. They're wanting flights and that kind of things. And I mean, if you look at, I think it's called, what is it, Stargate project? It's OpenAI, NVIDIA, Microsoft. They've got $500 billion in the bank right now to go build all these plants. Some of these large clients like that, they want this data, and they're just throwing money at people to give it to them. So I think
Yeah.
like stay on top of that kind of stuff too with what's going on in these like the industry for these, especially with AI and data centers and power plants right now.
Yeah. I would say it comes down to like two things. Oh, my fingers get blurry. Like it thinks this is the background. Two things that I've seen. First off, you can just listen to Drone to 1K podcast. There's plenty of examples of kind
Mm.
of all different sort of niches. But there's the knowledge aspect, right? Like, do you know how to do this type of work that will be accepted in these professions, right? Like where people will trust you to give them accurate data. So you have to get to that level first. But then a lot of it, even if you're really good at that, if you don't really know business very well and you don't know how to go get customers, or you're not willing to like call people, reach out to people on email, walk into the trailer and ask for a contact, like you kind of have to have the go-getter uh, willingness to go out there and get the work, because I think a lot of people underestimate um, like how important it is to know how to go get business and be a good business, because you're in
Yeah.
business at that point for yourself. So not being afraid to like do marketing, and marketing as in make yourself and your services known to people and go to conferences and network and do all those things, right? You're the one who has to close the deals. So I've seen people who are very knowledgeable or skilled or great pilots, and they may not be as successful as someone who's way less qualified or experienced than them, just because that other person just networks themselves to death and is willing to go out and talk to anybody. Like Root amazes me how he lands some of these clients, because this guy just has absolutely no shame. He will just like he like if I'm gonna call someone, sometimes I'll get like called like I don't know if I'm gonna call cold call him or this or that or yeah, and he'll just like he'll walk in and talk to anybody. He just it doesn't even register on his radar to be like nervous or self conscious about it. So
Well, that's not said
um,
like those guys that stop on our job sites and just walk in and be like, "Hey, you guys use this? You want to buy this? You looking for this?" And it's
yeah,
like
yeah. So anyways,
I would say
um,
too, like one of the things for like even internally for Kiwit is like I'm so weird to say. Like if you start asking around internally, they're like, "Yeah, Nate's the SME on this. Contact
yeah,
him." But part of that is because like even here, I had to like internally these large companies. If you do sign on with one of them, you get hired on. There's still a lot of internal marketing I have to do to go like, hey, there's value in this. Look at what we can do. And a part of that goes back to like I've talked about a couple times is like I use my imagination to go, I don't know, can we do this with it? Would it help out with this? We had on one of our projects an IT guy that had a bunch of wireless stuff for the internet, like local networks set up all over this project. So he started using the aerial to mark where all these network locations were for everybody. He started marking on these aerials where the connexes were and all the equipment that was in there and what was in those for like doing aerial inventories on things, right? So it's like just keep that kind of stuff in mind too. And like even if you do sign on to a large company, you may just have to like push and network from the bottom up to get a program started to get more people involved in this. Because like again, a lot of people are going, "Hey, I'm too busy to think of what we can do with this crap." Plus, again, like if there's the first time something goes wrong with it, the first time there's a hiccup in processing and there's an issue with the satellite and there's some deviation in the surface, everybody's going to be like, it's terrible, don't use it. So like you've got to stay consistent and don't get down. Like keep a positive attitude, because you're going to run into clients and you're going to run into people internally in the companies you're with that are just going to be like, no, it's not worth it. It's like set a goal, stick to it, and just keep pushing it and keep selling it and keep providing a good service.
yeah, and I think what you said, like, staying positive, I think that's one of the biggest assets if you do have a business, because people always underestimate the number of potential customers that are out there for that thing, because not everybody's going to want exactly what you have to offer at the moment you approach them. But I can't tell you how many stories I've heard and how many times I hear it of, yeah, I talked to these people and like they didn't need me now, but then I got a call 8 months down the road or whatever. I mean, this is just business in any industry. Like we offer curriculum to schools, and like for some other stuff totally separate to all this, for like high schools, and it'll just be like, we'll talk to someone and then a year later they'll be like, oh yeah, we want that, we're going to roll it out at our entire school district for 400 students. You're like, oh,
Yep.
great. But at first it's just kind of like, oh, I thought that conversation went nowhere. So it's just consistently putting in lots of effort to get to know a lot of people, to let them know what you do, and not get discouraged when someone's like, yeah, not right now, or maybe they doubt this or that. If you continually develop, call them leads, whatever, prospecting, if you continue to put that effort in, it will compound, and then eventually it'll start all flowing in. So
Yep.
cool. All right, everyone. Well, now we're 2 hours and 9 minutes in, so I'm definitely gonna let Nate go now. Sorry. And Javier, yes, if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts and email us, we'll send you a T-shirt as a thank you. So there you go. Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Big thanks to Nate for coming on here after his long travel days and getting run into the ground, but still showing up to help us out. So I appreciate it, man.
I should clean up that story and post that on LinkedIn. My travel escapades.
That was pretty fun. I was sitting in here. Nate texted me this, just like his long write up of everything that happened while he was on his trip, and I was just like cracking up laughing. It was very entertaining.
And that wasn't even the shenanigans that happened at work. It was just every time I travel, something great. I went to Sydney. I'll wrap this up with a couple of fun stories. Went to Sydney to visit Propeller. Was excited. First time I'd ever been in a Tesla for an Uber. Got hit by a dump truck.
What?
While we were in it.
Oh boy.
Got to see the cool technology that's in the Tesla. Another trip, came back, landed in Dallas, Fort Worth, took the free shuttle to go to my parking spot. We got hit by another free shuttle. And I was like, dude, I just want to go home. I was like, I'm just trying to, like, all my trips are like, I'm just trying to get back home, man.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, at least you got upgraded to first class. That was nice.
Yeah. But no, I really appreciate it. It was great getting to chat with you guys, answer questions. My LinkedIn's already started blowing up.
Nice. Before we go, I have one last question. I see Steve here. Let me just give a quick thing. So, equipment and expenses need to do this 1,000 for. So it depends on what you're doing, right? If you want to get like what I would call a enterprise mapping drone, sort of like your base level is probably like a Mavic 3 Enterprise with the RTK module on it. Those are, I think, right now around, we'll call it $4,000. However, this is probably not as popular, but I've done tests where if you take even an Air 2S, which is like a 1-inch sensor, Kiewit's not going to go out and buy an Air 2S because they have like a lot of money. But let's say you had an Air 2S. It's got a 1-inch sensor, which is like the same size as might be on a M350 camera, right? Now it's not going to have as good as GPS and all that, but you can still create a map with that. And then if you have good survey control points, you can still adjust that map, and it will be pretty good. And you can validate it with check shots, or if the surveyor has, or whoever you're working with, engineering firm, can take their check shots. When I was doing this, when we were doing it, Nate, remember we compared like the wing uncorrected photos with PPK, like with the GPS corrections.
Yep.
And then we did one where there's no GPS corrections. It was just the control points. And like what made the biggest difference was tying it to the control points. And then it got a little better when we did the PPK too. So,
yep.
And then with these software, a lot of them are cloud-based software processing. So I think the easiest one to get into, virtual surveyor. Well, actually, that's not cloud processing. If you have a nice computer, let's say a computer with an NVIDIA graphics card, like maybe $1,200 desktop, you can process a lot of stuff locally on your computer. Otherwise, you can use Drone Deploy, Propeller, Pix4D. They have like by the month options, things like that, if you want to process with them. So yeah, it's not cheap to get into, but that's also why these jobs probably pay the most.
I would say too with that, like if you talk about some of these cloud-based softwares like Propeller, so like we use Propeller, and some of our projects have used third-party drone services. We pay for the Propeller platform, all of the processing, which is probably the most expensive portion compared to just the drone. And we're paying a guy that goes out there, sets the arrow points, GCP stuff for us, and just submits the data to there. Like, so you might be able to work out deals like that. It's like, hey, you guys pay for this cloud processing software that's going to house all your data. It's secure, yada, yada, yada. I've got the drone and the know-how to give you the correct information for that software to process.
Yeah. And then, or just, if you're doing it yourself, you just build it into like, hey, here's my hourly rate for my time. Here's a fee for the, software stuff. Here's, you can,
yep.
Or you don't have to necessarily break it out, show all that, but all that's kind of bundled into your pricing. Because anybody who's going to be doing these jobs is going to have to use this software, and they're all, you have to pay for them all. So nobody's going to come in there and do it for $10 and give a quality deliverable. So cool.
Yep.
All right, everyone. I think that's all we got time for, but we'll do another one with Nate in the future, I'm sure. But Nate, go get some sleep, man. Thank you so much for jumping on here, and we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks.
Yep. Later, guys. Thanks.